If you've been around the podcast or maybe followed me on social media, especially Instagram, you probably have heard me talk about teaching my children worldview and how they see the worldview. And the fact that for my family, a biblical worldview is important and it's the basis for everything else. It's the basis for how we live, it's the basis for how we homeschool. And also, you know that my kids are older. And when my kids were younger, there weren't necessarily resources. I had to pull things together. And of course, we have the resource of the Bible, which is the foundation of it all. But what if there was a resource that came alongside you for your younger children so you can lay that foundation? Because no matter where we turn, no matter how much we can try to protect our children, they're going to see things, they're going to hear things, they're going to maybe experience things and have questions. And I feel like that age that they're asking those questions is getting younger and younger and younger. And I know that you probably are a little bit like me in trying to protect them. And there were times where I failed at that and didn't necessarily have that foundation for when they were younger. And I was kind of scrambling. But today, all that to say, today I've got a resource for you. I have Elizabeth Urbaniwicz from Foundation Worldview, and her and I are just going to have a very open conversation about how to teach your children truth, how to show them that truth, the objective, like truth being objective or subjective, and their feelings, and how can we teach them God's goodness when it comes to how He created them, their gender, their view of sexuality, their view of marriage. So I think you're going to be really encouraged by this, and stay tuned for the end because I do have a promo code for her amazing resource, and I think you're just really going to enjoy hearing Elizabeth, the joy that she has for being able to serve you as a homeschool family. And you don't have to homeschool to use her resources, but I know that most of you that are listening here are homeschooling. So keep listening.
Welcome to Little by Little Homeschool Podcast, where you'll learn tips and strategies that will empower you to home educate your children. I'm Leigh Nguyen, a homeschool mom of over 12 years, which includes 2 graduates. When I started homeschooling, I was pretty much on my own and was desperate for encouragement and help. My mission is to be a source of encouragement and help to you. Whether you are just beginning your homeschool journey or you're deep into the homeschool lifestyle, Little by Little Homeschool wants to help you stay the course because all the time you are investing into your children is completely worth it. If you're ready to take your homeschool to new levels, keep listening.
Welcome to today's podcast episode. I am really looking forward to this conversation today. We're going to get into some things here, and it's going to be so good. So I've got Elizabeth here, and can we just start off? Just share a little bit about yourself so the listener knows who they are listening to.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on today, Leigh. So my name is Elizabeth Urbaniwicz, and unlike most of the listeners, I'm actually not a mom. I am single, not married, but God has given me a passion for helping the next generation of children understand what is true. And so I started off my professional career as an elementary teacher in a 3rd grade classroom at a Christian school. And when I was there, I loved teaching. I loved getting to come alongside parents and partner with them as they were seeking to raise their children in the truth. And as I spent years teaching, I noticed that just because the world around us was changing so rapidly, many of my students didn't have the skills that they needed to carefully evaluate the host of ideas that were coming their way. And I saw this issue both in families where the parents might have been a little bit more lax and had more screen time, and more exposure to different things in the world, as well as with families that were very, very careful about what their children were exposed to, and limited screen time. And so what I did is I just went on a journey of looking for how can I teach these little ones that God has placed in my care to carefully evaluate the ideas that come their way. And when I went looking for resources to do that, everything I found was for high school on up. And I was so grateful that those resources exist, because it's so important to train high schoolers to think critically and biblically. But I thought, man, I'm working with 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds. And if we wait until they're 16 before we teach them how to think critically and biblically, we've lost so much ground. And so I just started creating resources for my students, started teaching them in an after-school class. And before I knew it was happening, people saw this dramatic change in my students, that moms were calling me and were saying, my son wants to pause family movie night and evaluate the character's worldview. Like, this is great, but I need some help. Can you help me do this? And I was like, yes, so excited. And teachers from 4th grade and 5th grade were coming down and saying, how are you getting these kids in your after school class to think this deeply about mathematics and science and social studies and literature? And I was like, I'm kind of not exactly sure. I'm just teaching them some basic skills and they're running with them. And so before I knew what was even happening, people started contacting me from all over the country, just asking for these resources. And I was like, I don't have anything for you. I'm a 3rd grade teacher. I'm not a Christian publishing house. But those requests kept coming in. So after several years of that, while I was still teaching, I went back to school to get a master's degree in Christian apologetics, just to make sure that I really knew what I was talking about. And then eventually step back from teaching to start an organization called Foundation Worldview, where we create resources that equip Christian parents and also Christian educators and church leaders just with easy to implement tools so that they can get the kids God has placed in their care to carefully evaluate every idea that they encounter. So that's just a quick little nutshell of the past 10 years of my life.
That's such a good story. Thank you. That really kind of gives us an idea as to where Foundation Worldview, where it came from, and helps us then to understand that it's you. So we get to hear from you today. We know that you have this solid foundation and basis, and I love that you saw a need and God had brought you there. We were talking a little bit before about how God brought you to that school and how he's opened up the door, and then you didn't say, okay, I'm equipped here. Let me go back to school and let me really make sure that my theology is solid. And I love that you're saying that kids are saying, let's pause family movie night. Let's talk about that. Because I've got a 16-year-old currently right now who will do that, or he's old enough he can wait till afterwards, but he always has a lot to say because we've been doing a lot of worldview training, and he goes in the summer for the past 4 summers to a worldview camp for a week. And so it's been really good. So I love that you're providing parents with a resource that they can start that they can get that foundation, and it can be the cartoons that they watch or something, as opposed to sometimes ours is like superhero movies or something like that. And, I'm not as much into movies. My husband more so is into that with them. But yeah, I've got some, we're going to dive in here with some questions here. Are you ready for it?
Right.
All right, good. So culture teaches us the lie that something can be true for you, but not for me. And we know that from the Bible, this isn't reality. So can you explain a little bit more of that? And what are some ways we can help our children to understand that truth is objective?
Yes. Well, I'm sure that anyone who has scrolled on Instagram or turned on YouTube, like you've just heard this mantra, like live your truth, or speak your truth, just talking about how your inner emotional world, your personal experience is the best guide to reality. And we just inherently know that this is not true. When I was young, it was my dream to fly, like not in an airplane, but like arms outstretched, like flapping, and I would rise up off the ground. And I could believe with my whole heart that I can fly, or I can with my whole heart disbelieve in gravity. But my personal thoughts, feelings, or beliefs about gravity cannot change the fact that gravity exists and that it has an impact on my body and on my ability to rise off the ground on my own without a jetpack or something. And so we just know that truth is objective, meaning that it's outside of our inner thoughts, feelings world. And our kids are growing up in a world where this lie is just assumed. That, like sometimes people might say, oh, that's true for you, but not for me. Or they might say, live your truth or speak your truth. But most of the time, those kind of things aren't even talked about. It's just assumed that something that's good for you, that's true for you, is going to be different than what's true for me. And so where 50 years ago, we wouldn't have needed to have a conversation about truth like this with our children, it's vital that we have this conversation with them today so that they can begin discerning the difference between hearing a statement that's true or false versus a statement that's just somebody's personal feelings. And so the first thing I recommend that we need to do with our children is actually talk through a working definition of truth. Because truth is actually quite a difficult word to define. Usually when I ask people, okay, how would you define truth? usually it comes back to some sort of like, well, it's really important for us to tell the truth. And I can, affirm like, yes, that is a true statement that it's important for us to tell the truth, but you can't define a word by using the word, in the definition. We all know that from our grammar school days. And so philosophers, I'm going to give you a big philosophical definition, and then we're going to boil it down to what does this really mean? Philosophers have classically defined truth by saying truth is that which corresponds to reality. Now, say that to a 4-year-old or a 14-year-old, and you might get a blank stare. So an easy way to boil that down is just to say that truth is what is real. Truth is what is real. That's a definition that anyone, whether you're 4 or 40 or, 100 can understand. And so if we can boil it down to that definition and then give our kids just some simple activities to really solidify this concept. So if you're working with little ones in your home, if you have kids that are 7 or 8 or younger, that their bodies need to be involved in everything. We need to do a lot of tactile physical learning. So what we recommend at Foundation Worldview is you just play a simple game with them. Say, okay, I'm going to tell you some sentences. Some of these sentences are going to be true sentences. They're going to show you what is real. And if I tell you a true sentence, I want you to spread out your arms like an X and say true. Then I'm going to give you some not true sentences. I'm going to give you some sentences that do not show what is real. And if I give you a not true sentence, I want you to cross your arms like an X and say not true. And then you can play this game in the car, when you'd normally play the I Spy or I'm thinking of an animal game. Just give them some sentences, and some that are true and some that are not true. Easy. Just think about like an animal. You can say puppies are baby dogs. That's true. Then think of like, what's a silly, not true sentence I can give them? Because we know, especially little ones, they love to laugh. So think about like puppies run on the ceiling. Oh my goodness, that is so silly. That is not true. Cross your arms like an X. And so that can just start creating in their minds this mental category for true, not true. If you're working with older kids, if you have kids 8 on up, and you can even include like a 6 or 7-year-old in this activity, one thing you can do in your home is just find something that your kids would consider a prize, like a piece of chocolate, a sticker, a date with dad certificate, something like that. Hide it somewhere in your house, and then write out 2 or 3 different sets of instructions for finding that prize. But here's the key. Only one set of instructions can be real. Only one set of instructions can be true instructions. So tell your kids ahead of time, okay, somewhere in this house, there's a piece of chocolate or whatever it is hidden. Say, I have some sets of instructions here. Some of them are true instructions. Some of them tell you where the prize really is. Some of them are not true. They do not tell you where the prize really is. Let your kids choose. Then send them off on the treasure hunt. And only one child or one group of children is going to find the prize. Now, it's really important. I know, some mama hearts might be like, I just want everybody to have, like the piece of chocolate. It's really important for the lesson here that you not have enough for everybody. So then come back together and debrief and say, okay, why? Why did your brother, your brother the only one that found this chocolate or the sticker or whatever it was? And then read through the directions and talk about, only this was the true set of directions. Only this set of directions showed what was really real. And then you could, if you want to take it even further, you can talk about, is it a big deal that you missed out on this chocolate or this sticker or this whatever today? Not really. It's not really a huge deal. But what would happen in life if we believed some things that were not true? And then you can talk about, some things you might believe that are not true. Like, what if we believe that soccer practice starts at 4 and it actually starts at 3? Well, then you might have to sit out for the game. What happens if we believe that cars drove down the left side of the road instead of the right? Oh, we might get run over. That could be really dangerous. What happens if somebody was really sick with something like cancer and they thought that the cure for cancer was eating ice cream? That might make them happy, but that, the cancer is going to keep growing. So just to give them the idea that, it's truth, knowing truth is really important. And then after you've done that, you can talk about feelings or emotions and how our emotions are inside of us. They're always changing. My emotions about something are going to be different than your emotions. You can talk about how when you say, hey, it's time to go visit grandma, one sibling might be really excited. Another sibling might be in the middle of building a Lego tower and they're like, I don't want to leave right now. Our emotions are always going to change, but our emotions are different than truths because truths are outside of us where our emotions are inside of us. So then with little ones, play that true, not true game, add in a third category, feelings, and just say, when I give you a feeling sentence, hug yourself and say feelings. And then with that, you can, give those same sentences about dogs and then add a sentence like puppies are fun. And you can say, well, that's a feeling. A lot of people feel like puppies are fun, but some people, when a puppy's chewing on their sofa, do not feel like puppies are fun. And then you can, have that same conversation with older kids and talk about what are some feelings. An activity you can do with older kids is bake some chocolate chip cookies or something else, and then talk about what are sentences we can say about these cookies that are outside of us. They're either true or false. Like, these cookies have chocolate chips. These cookies were made in our home. These cookies have flour, sugar, and butter, things like that. And then what are some sentences we could say about these cookies that are just feelings that are going to change from person to person? I used to do this activity with my students, and I would say, these cookies are gross because I'm really strange and I don't like chocolate. So I don't like chocolate chip cookies. So that's a feeling that I have, but it's going to change. And I'm like, who thinks who has a different feeling about that? And most of my students would raise their hand. They think the cookies are yummy. You can talk about sentences like, these cookies are too big. These cookies are too soft. These cookies are not worth the calories, just to give our children a paradigm. Because if we've set up this paradigm of true, not true, and feeling, anytime they hear someone say something, they're then going to use that paradigm. Is this person claiming that something is true? Are they claiming something is false? Or are they just sharing their personal feelings with me? And it's so important that we ground them in this so that they just don't get swept away in this cultural tide of believing the lie that truth changes from person to person to person. Feelings change from person to person to person, but truth does not.
That is so good. I wish I had those tools in those games. My kids would have loved that. And instead of having to I like how you just give different ways of them figuring things out instead of jumping straight into the Bible says, and then not that we don't include Bible verses, but let's give them an understanding of the terms in what they see and what they're experiencing in life with the puppies and all these things. And so they understand that they can kind of figure it out a little bit better. So then they can build upon that and have deeper conversations, as I assume that's where things go. Yes. And I think the hard thing is for kids, you run into it, especially a lot if you interact with a lot of people or just even on social media, that a lot of people don't understand these terms. And so they do believe that they are living in the reality and truth of their own truth. And that's fine for you. And that's fine. And those things can be like, well, I prefer to eat this certain way and that it works best for my body. My body processes it better if I eat, more protein and less carbs. And someone else saying, well, I might need more carbs to help that process. And that's okay. But we use that then. I think society, our culture takes that and puts it into huge terms as well of I can live this certain way and I can serve these other gods, these other idols. I can live in my truth. And yeah, I think Oprah was a big one probably back in the day. And I'm sure she's still talking about it now and stuff. I think that very much infiltrated. And I don't know that we knew. I'm older than you. So I'm getting close to 50. My kids are all teens. And so I've seen it. And I remember myself being confused as a teen, especially in the public school system, would hear one thing at church and something else 5 days a week at school. And my parents didn't have this knowledge and didn't quite see all that I was seeing and hearing and that confusion. So I love that you're starting with them young so that they can clearly see that and discern what is mom saying? What is mom and dad saying? What does the Bible say? And instead of just being swayed, I think and the Bible talks about that too, being swayed by the culture. So
yeah. And I think you're hitting on something important there is that, it's the timing. It's never too late. It is never too late to start instructing our children in the truth. So if anybody's listening and thinking like, oh, my children are way older than the age of 7, it's never too late. But there's a huge advantage to starting this training early because when our children are 7 and younger, just with the way that God designed their brains are still just forming and the neurological pathways are really just solidifying during that time. So if we can give them, this paradigm for evaluating information at this age, it's something that is much more likely to stick with them and to really shape the way that they think than if we do it later. I even think about when I have these, when I go through these examples with adults, when I'm speaking somewhere in person, a lot of times I'll give adults sentences and I'll say, okay, is this sentence making an objective claim, like it's either true or false, or is it making a subjective claim? And a lot of times we as adults have so much difficulty discerning the difference because, one, we haven't been trained in this way, and two, we're just living in this culture that is preaching us this lie 24/7. We're like 5-year-olds, they can do this so easily. Like people who've implemented one of our curriculums, they'll write in and they'll be like, my child, like we'll just be having an everyday conversation. And my child is like, oh, mommy, but that's just a feeling. That's not a truth. And they're like, you're right. I didn't even think of it that way. So I think you're hitting on something important there, Leigh, that, it's great when we can start this training at a really young age.
That's true. When you think about that age range, they just say what is true. There is no, for better, for worse, sometimes, you're at the store and they say something that you're like, that was a conversation for home and not, that's like I don't want to say family secret, but like you have sometimes they're not like inappropriate or immoral or any type of secrets, right. But just like, we don't need everybody to know that whatever, like quirky thing that we like to do or something. But yeah, they just kind of say what they're thinking. And often it's just straight out truth and it's facts. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about a new resource that you have. And as we're talking about young kids and older kids, a lot of Christian resources that have to do with gender and sexuality, they focus on teens. And you recommend, as we've been talking, starting with children as young as the age of 4. Can you explain why you recommend starting at that young age? I know we've kind of touched a little bit on that, but how would you advise parents to approach such conversations? Sometimes we come into it with our own feelings. I've been open and talked about the fact that my parents didn't talk to me about any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't as in your face as it is now. Right. And I think that if we don't talk about it, it's going to be in our kids. They're going to see it. They're going to hear it. They're going to somehow view it. And at that age, back in the 80s, we could get away with not saying anything. And so I remember the night before a class at school that I was mortified that my mom was thinking about exempting me from. I was like, you can't do that. I'll be the only kid. And her finally having a conversation with me. And I was like in 6th grade. I already knew stuff from kids from school. And it's just, So a lot of us sometimes come in with that and then decide we want to change the story for our kids. Mm-hmm. And that's what I had done. But I don't have these great resources that you have. So anyway, all that to kind of explain, if you could explain a little bit about why the young age and how can parents feel confident and empowered and also just knowing the truth and how to explain this to their young ones.
Yeah, really good questions. And again, we're hitting on the age thing again. And here at Foundation Worldview, like you said, we just came out with resources to talk about like identity, gender, sexuality, marriage, and family with kids as young as 4. And the reason for this is really our kids are going to be exposed to things, whether we like it or not. It's just the world that we live in. I live in a very conservative area of the country. I live in a great neighborhood. The kids are constantly out, in between one another's houses. I love living where I live. And even in the place where I live, my neighbors a few houses down who I care for deeply are 2 men who are, I'm putting this in air quotes that your listeners can't see, but they are married to one another. And I think about, all of the families on my block, their kids see this all of the time. And it's the same with, even seeing, sadly, like children who are their parents are allowing them or encouraging them to express themselves, present themselves as another gender. Like our kids are just going to be exposed to these things. And so the first reason why I think we need to start these conversations so young is we want to make sure that our children understand that being created as sexed beings, being created as distinctly male or distinctly female, being created with reproductive systems, being created with the capacity one day when we're married, to reproduce is a good gift from God. Now, sometimes as adults, it's even hard for us to think of it this way because sex is something that the world has just taken and twisted so terribly. We kind of tend to inherently think of sex and sexuality as something that's dirty, where that's not what Scripture teaches. When we look right at the first chapter of Genesis, in Genesis 1:27, it talks about man being created in God's image. And then the last line of that verse, which is poetry, says, male and female, he created them. And so we see the goodness of God's design. And then the next verse in Genesis 1:28, God gives Adam and Eve a command and he says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So God is commanding them to engage in the good gift of sex that he's given them to to repopulate the earth. And so we need to make sure that our kids, that their first exposure to the concept of gender or sexuality or marriage or family is a positive one, because God has designed sexuality as a good gift. So are we going to need to talk to our kids about things like, like premarital sex and homosexuality and transgenderism, pornography, those things? Yes, we're going to need to have those conversations, and pretty early on, but we don't want those to be the first conversations. If we wait to have a conversation about what marriage is until our children run into a homosexual couple, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to backtrack. And our kids' first understanding of this topic is going to be a negative one. So that's the first reason that I really encourage parents to have these conversations at young ages, because we want the first conversation to be a positive one, that this is a good gift that God has given us. This is part of God's good design, so that therefore, anytime we talk about a deviation or a twisting or a corruption of that design, they still have the foundation of understanding that this is a positive thing inherently. The second reason we really need to have these conversations at an early age is I don't know if it's official because I'm not a psychologist, but there is something that I've noticed. It's just like a psychological phenomenon that whoever talks to us about something first, in our mind, that person is the expert. Like I think about myself, my dad is not an expert in home repairs by no means. And there are many people I now know and live close to who are experts in like plumbing or electrical work or just like different things around the home. However, whenever there's a problem in my house, my dad is the first person I call, not because he's the greatest expert, but because he is the first person who talked to me about these things. So in my mind, even though intellectually I know he's not the greatest expert, in my mind, he's still the expert, and I call him. Similar to when I think about how I learned to study the Bible, I learned to study the Bible from a YouTube Bible teacher who fortunately was a sound, YouTube Bible teacher. And so now I know that there are scholars and other people I can go to who have way more information than this person. But in my mind, that person is still the expert because I learned about this from them first. So as you mentioned before, Leigh, by the time your mom, had some of these conversations with you, you had already learned about sex and sexuality and things like that from friends. And so if we wait until our children have already heard about these things from friends or from YouTube or, who knows where, they're not going to naturally come to us with their questions. Where if we can have the first conversations with them in their minds, we're naturally going to become the experts on that topic. So it's going to be much more likely that when our kids hear things or they see things, they're going to come to us. And then as an added bonus, on top of those two reasons, when you have a conversation about sex with a 4 or a 5 or a 6-year-old, there is only one person in that conversation who feels awkward, and it's you. Once we wait until our children are nearing puberty or are already going through puberty, that is just an awkward time because our kids' bodies are changing, their emotions are changing, their desires are changing. And so it's already a naturally uncomfortable time in the relationship as we figure out, okay, what is our role as parent? How do we navigate this relationship? They're trying to figure out what's going on. So if we wait until those already awkward years to have the first conversation about sex, everyone involved in the conversation feels uncomfortable. Where when you're talking to a little one about it, you are the only one who feels uncomfortable. And so long as you have a smile on your face and keep calm, your child has no idea that you are very uncomfortable in this conversation. So I recommend for those reasons, it is just very wise when we have the first conversations. And I say conversations because it's not just one talk. It needs to be an ongoing conversation with our child about gender and sexuality and marriage and family. When we have these first conversations when they're little, we're just setting things on a positive trajectory.
As you're telling that story, I'm like, yep, exactly. That was me. And so going back to my story, I decided I had a couple of books that I had found that encouraged me to talk to my kids young. And I was so uncomfortable. I was like trying not to giggle and laugh like a 13-year-old girl or something like that. And they just sat there and just looked at me and just took it in. I'm like, hold it in. And the more that I did it, so if you are listening and you're like, I'm going to be that person. The more that you do it, the more that you talk about it, the more comfortable you get. And then your kids are receptive and listen and then start to come to you for things. So my youngest, I'm super comfortable. And so I have one girl and two boys, and I will talk to, obviously the girls is easiest. I can relate on a biological scale. We can talk about all the things, but the boys too. And they'll be like, hey, so let's talk about, I know we're not talking about pornography here. And they're like, oh, okay, mom, we know, and I'm like, but hey, if I've heard something new or if I want something to share something again. And so they, at this point, get a little bit maybe awkward, but I still do it anyway, because again, I want them to hear it from me and not from somebody else, not from their friends. Cause I'm going to tell you those stories and the things that I learned from my quote unquote friends before my mom talked to me were not all accurate. So, so if you're listening and you're like, I feel awkward, just do it. You'll be so glad, and you lay that foundation and they will come to you. The fruit of it is then seeing them coming to you and asking you questions, or even as they get older, they might not always come to you, but you start the conversation anyway, and stories and things will come out. So the God's good design, right? Is that the name of the curriculum? What is the age range that is geared towards?
So when we created it with 4 through 8-year-olds in mind. We tell sometimes families will write in and they'll say, I have a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 10-year-old. Can I include the 10-year-old? And we say, absolutely, because your 10-year-old is going to view themselves, as a leader in the family. And so helping their younger siblings along with a curriculum like that, they're going to get a lot out of it. And they're not going to feel talked down to because they recognize they're helping their younger siblings. We say, if you just have a 10-year-old, this is not the materials for you, because we talk, I'm the one that teaches in the videos, and I'm like, I am so excited that you were here with me today, and a 5, 6, 7-year-old are excited about that. A 10-year-old is like, what is wrong with that woman? So those is the age group that these materials are intended for. And like I said before, our goal with it is really to first lay out the positive biblical theology of God's goodness, and then to introduce our kids to some of the corruptions that they're going to find in the world around them. And sometimes, even within our own hearts.
I think it's so good to have the foundation of the goodness, so that you do not see things as just always the negative. You know that isn't how it's supposed to be. And we can keep coming back to the goodness. We can go back to, you're talking and quoting the verses from Genesis, and how God created us male and female, and how he's created us to be a couple and a family. So I'm excited about this curriculum. I'm going to drop links in the show notes for it and for your site and everything overall. But you do have a promo code, which is little10, to receive $10 off of, you have a family license for that curriculum for the Foundation Worldview. And this is something that they can incorporate into their homeschool day, or if they want to wait for when the whole family's together, when dad's home, they want to do it sometime on the weekends, or sometimes you do it as a family and then mom follows up during the week. There's just probably a lot of different ways that you can do it together individually. If you have one child, you can do it. If you have 5, you can do it as well. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. So some people do it during the school day, or others. One of the gentlemen on our team, he was the man that was just reading through the script as we were filming and making sure I was saying everything accurately. And when we were done, he was like, when this comes out, we're doing this as a family. So every Thursday, his wife homeschools the kids during the day, but every Thursday evening after dinner together, they go through one of the lessons together. So it's just exciting to see different ways that families foster this kind of discipleship.
No, that's perfect. Because I think that really it's good for mom and dad to know, what is this resource saying, so that when children come to mom or dad, and I'm not saying if one just does it. I know there were some times where we did everything as a family, because I was like, I don't want to have to reiterate to my husband what this is saying, or he's clueless when they come and say, hey, we were learning about this. And especially with topics like this, that they would, especially the boys, end up as they get older gravitating towards him, so he kind of understands where they're coming from. So I'm going to drop the link for that in the show notes. But thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being here today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Leigh. It's just been a joy to be with you.
With all the information that we have out there now, I really don't think that parents have to be worried about having these conversations, or be scared, or be the one, as Elizabeth and I were talking, being the one who feels uncomfortable. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. So go check out Foundation Worldview and the resources that Elizabeth has created. It sounds like they are really responsive if you get in touch with them and have questions and stuff like that. But I'm going to drop all the links in the show notes. And please definitely use that promo code of little10. So the number 10. So LITTLE 10. That'll be in the show notes as well, go ahead and check out all the resources and the ways that you can be able to have the words and have Elizabeth there teaching your kids, and then you guys can have the conversations afterwards. And I just want to encourage you to use the resources and the availability that we have of the internet, which sometimes, we can poo poo it and we can be like, put it down and stuff. But let's use the parts of it for good and be able to then have that foundation for your children so that you aren't scrambling. And like she's saying, it's never too late. It absolutely is never too late. If you do have older children and you're looking for some resources, especially for teens, please reach out and let me know. And I'm sure you can reach out to Elizabeth as well. So, friend, thank you for listening to today's episode. And I'll be promised to be back here very soon.
Thank you for listening, friend. I'd love to connect with you more. You can find social media links in the show notes and share this episode with a friend who could use a boost to her homeschool. See you back here real soon.